Welcome to Avalara. We're here to help you tackle the complex and ever-changing world of sales tax compliance so you can focus on what you do best, running your business. Whether you're a growing family business or a large international manufacturer, we'll be with you every step of the way to help you manage your changing tax compliance needs as your business grows. We're excited to step into your corner and help your business thrive.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Understanding Harmonized System Codes. My name is Caitlin. Welcome one, welcome all. If this is your first time in one of our Avalara customer webinars, welcome. It's so great to have you. If you've been here a million times, welcome back. It's great to have you. Today we are covering Harmonized System Codes, or HS codes, and covering the groundwork with a basic overview. After that, we'll dive into some trends and considerations related to that topic. If this isn't your first webinar, sit back, relax. You all know I have to do this part. This is our friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal tax advice. We're going to be talking about a lot today, and we're going to answer your questions as best as we can. But none of it is legal or tax advice. So we're going to do our best. If you have a question, put it in the Ask a Question box. We're going to do our best to answer them. But this is our friendly reminder. Safe harbor statement up on the screen here. Take a moment to review this while I continue with my housekeeping. We are recording today's webinar, so if you want to listen to it again or share with a colleague, you'll receive the link in 24 hours. In the same email inbox in which you registered with. The console that you're looking at can be customized, so feel free to move or resize any of those windows. I want to point everybody to the additional resources section. So in that tile, in that box, you're going to find all of the related resources for today, relevant links, articles, next steps, all of that will be in the additional resources section, as well as the presentation slides. So check that out. If there are anything you want to check out in the additional resources, I do want to point out, I highly recommend clicking on them now. They'll open up a new tab and be waiting for you. When we end this webinar, the entire console is going to disappear. So if there's any you'd like to check out now, click on them and they'll open up in a new tab and be waiting for you when the webinar is over. As I mentioned, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use that Ask a Question box. That's going to be the best way for us to receive and answer your questions. We also have our group chat. So this button is down at the bottom with the little chat bubbles. This is your space to interact with other Avalara customers on the call. I always like to have a little bit of fun and say, hi, my name is Caitlin, and I'm tuning in from, wherever you're tuning in from. Hello from Seattle, Washington. Question mark icon is down at the bottom. If you have any technical issues, click on that and it'll open up a frequently asked questions page, which can help you get back on track. All right, lastly, if you have a moment, please respond to the survey questions at the end of the webinar. When the console disappears, a survey pops up asking you what you thought. Let us know. All righty, it's time to introduce our presenter for today. Colin is the go-to person when I think of anything HS codes, really. He's a business development manager for cross-border at Avalara, and he's been in this world of trade compliance for over 13 years. Now, he joined Avalara officially in 2021 when Avalara acquired 3CE and helps our customers with all of their HS classification needs. I can't think of a better person to be joining us today. Colin, thank you so much for being here. He is tuning in from, I believe, Toronto, Canada. So thank you so much for being here. We're happy to have you.
Thanks for the introductions, Caitlin, and glad to be here as well. So let's dig right in to our topic of discussion today, which is HS codes. So HS codes, what are they? So HS, and they're typically described as the HS. It's an abbreviation for the term harmonized system. So the harmonized system is the first 6 digits of a 10-digit or more national tariff level code that people use to classify and identify their items when they're going about international trade. They're managed by the World Customs Organization, and they're designed to be universally accepted so that when you classify an item in one country, the first 6 digits represent that same item in just about every other country you go to. And that's why they call it the harmonized system. So here's an example on the screen. If you were a trader and you had an item to classify, you would refer to the HS, or the first 6 digits, in order to properly classify and identify your item in the customs tariff schedule. Once you've obtained that code, you would apply it to, you'll see on the very right-hand side, you've got customs. It goes onto your customs declaration. Perhaps there are other government agencies that need to be reported on for your item. So you will apply that code, and that code has an effect on how you report your information to all the other regulatory authorities, including customs. And so that's the importance of the HS code as you go about classifying your item for international trade. But let's look into it a little bit deeper. Let's look at how it's structured. And it helps us understand not only how to classify, but some of the challenges that come along with classifying items. So on the right-hand side, we actually have a page torn right out of the tariff book for the European Union as an example. If you were in the US, if you're in Canada, or you're in the EU, or in other parts of the world, they would have a similar page from a tariff book for the country that you're classifying your item into. But here's how the HS is actually structured. It's structured in a hierarchical way. And what that means is, and if you look at the diagram on the left-hand side, you'll see the first 2 digits, the 17, are the chapter. If you are not in the correct chapter, you're not classifying your item correctly. So the first thing you do when you classify is ensure that you're in the right chapter. Then you move to the heading that's tied to the chapter, subheading, and then once you've got the first 6 digits, you go to the national portion. And what that means is, let's take Canada as an example. The next digits past the universal 6 could differ from the US, the EU, and so on. And so on the bottom, we actually have the actual breakdown. There are 21 sections, 96 chapters, and the HS, the first 6 digits, are updated every 5 years. The national tariff level portion, which is past the original 6, can change much more frequently. Annually, there may be multiple changes per year that a government, a customs authority for a particular government might want to make at that level. So there's constant change and update to the national tariff level and the HS. Okay. This slide here points to what governments and industry are recognizing, that there are challenges with classification. Thomson Reuters and KPMG commissioned a study, a survey in 2016, and they came up with this response based on their respondents. The majority of the respondents identified classification or product classification as a challenge. The Auditor General of Canada, and they're not the only government, have recognized that there are misclassifications amongst reported items, and 20% is quite a high level. So both government and industry and trade and actual users constantly express that there are challenges to accurately classify their items. But let's dig into that challenge further, because it isn't as simple as saying it's difficult to classify. Let's break down some of these examples. And many people struggle with one or more of these. Let's look at the first one. Commercial descriptions and or engineering retail descriptions differ from the language written in the HS. Here's one example. We have a few more on the next slides. Baby food. If you were looking in the HS for baby food, you would find homogenized composite food preparations. That's not a one-to-one match. So you would actually have to understand how the HS describes your product before you can actually get to the correct part or a section to classify it correctly. Another challenge is there are rules for interpretation, which are called GRIs, or references to legal notes with guidance on how to accurately classify your item. We've got two on the screen. The second one, tomato juice, is an example we'll break down a little bit further. But essentially, the chapter note 20, note 4 takes tomato juice out of the juice section and puts it into the food section. It's kind of like going to the grocery store and saying, look, I need tomato juice, and you go right to the juice section, but there's a sign saying, no, you got to go to the produce section and get it. So that can be challenging for people, but we'll look at that shortly. Okay. Next, complex items. If you have complex items that you're working with, they could be sets and kits, they could be dual-use items where perhaps one or more code may apply depending on end use. These are just two examples of complex items that you may be struggling to classify. Knowledge management. This is another one. Many discussions we hear, there are not enough qualified people or people who understand classification, or even domain experts who understand the product to help with classification available. And then the people you do have remaining who may be experts and doing it for a long period of time, they're getting ready to retire. Or maybe they're going to change departments. Where does your knowledge go? It goes with them. That's a challenge people have when it comes to accurately classifying. And then there's a reliance on ineffectual or inappropriate tools, or you can't get the right tool to help you classify. We're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. Let's start with that first item. If you look at these two boxes here, on the left, we talk about, remember we talked about tomato juice falling out of the juice section? So if you look at it, juices in general are not considered beverages. They're moved over for preparations in the fruits or vegetable section. If you didn't know that, you would take a longer time to classify your items to get them classified correctly. Or look, you have the same for car seats and even electric toothbrushes. I love the electric toothbrushes because the same applies to hairdressing, a hair dryer, right? These are considered electromechanical domestic appliances. Okay. On the right-hand side, you have other examples: computers, baby food, wheelchairs. Cell phone's a good one. It's not on here. It's a portable telecommunications device. But you're probably asking, why, Colin? Why is it like that? So here's the short answer. The HS has to be able to help a user classify the millions, billions, trillions of articles that exist out there. And it cannot implicitly describe an iPhone, a cell phone. It has to be described in languages that covers these items. And that's why you have this difference of describing items in the HS versus, again, your retail, engineering, or real-life commercial examples out there. That's why the language differs. Okay? And that's why it's written that way. So you've got a challenge to classify, you need help. What's the first thing you do? Most people say, how can I empower my teams or myself to classify better? You look outside for tools. And who do you look to first to help you? Is the government. So we've got an example here of, this is in the UK, HMRC. And this is some of the tools that they provide for importers. Let's look at the first box on the very left-hand side. They have an online tool that you as an importer in the UK, and this is just an example. You can go to other countries' websites and get the same type of service. So you'll go in, put your paper shredder in, and when you look for a result, you get that result. You don't get one. Why is this happening? And why does this happen so often? It's because this is a keyword search tool. Remember what we just said? The language in the HS is different from commercial descriptions for items. So if you're looking for a one-to-one match, the majority of times you're not going to find it. So that type of tool out there may not help you. Then what's your next step? You say, look, I need more expert help. The middle section has guidebooks. So if you look at that guidebook, these guidebooks that the UK government puts out are good for complex items. You know what the problem is? They only cover 19 different complex items. There are way more than 19 complex items out there that you may need help classifying. Now, if your item's footwear and the other 18 items, that's great. But there are a lot of people who have complex items that don't fall into those. So now you're still left with a hole to fill on guidance on how to classify. So what do most people do in the third step? I'm going to call the government. They're going to do it for me. I'm going to get a binding ruling. You can get that in the US. You can go to US CBP and get a binding ruling. Other countries have that facility. We're going to use the UK example here. You can reach out to the government and get help with classifying your item. But look at the challenges to doing that. You might wait 5 business days or more. If your item is on its way or stuck in customs or in any other state where you need immediate assistance, this doesn't help you. And then it's not legally binding, the guidance they give. You may still, customs may still come back to you and ask you questions on it. So you can see that there's a challenge in getting the right tools to help you classify. But that's where we come in. Avalara has options for classification tools to suit your needs. And you can choose which one or more tools can help you classify. So let me explain the options you have here. I'm showing you 3 different classification services here. Let me describe to them very simply how they operate. Remember that first step most everyone takes? What can I go out there and get to help empower my teams, help me classify? That first option that Avalara has is called a self-serve tariff code classification service. It's an expert-based government-level classification tool that allows the user to classify an item as an expert does. It uses multiple types of technologies to help the user, but a user is able to classify an item if they have all the information in front of them to classify their item. Okay? The next option, and it's kind of a fork in the road, when you look in your needs and your requirements and say, I need help classifying, there's usually one question that determines how you're going to do that. Will you get some tools like the self-serve tariff code classifier to empower your teams to help your teams classify better? Or will you say, look, I don't have enough people, I don't have enough time, I'm going to outsource it. So when you come to the second decision, say, look, I better outsource this, I need help with this, you have 2 options. You have a managed and a premium managed service. And you have both options to determine which one you'd like to send to. But essentially, you send your data to our team that uses technology, but there's a human at the end to help you classify. Let's dig into these, and I can give you a little bit more detail on both of them. We're going to start with self-serve tariff code classification. The self-serve tariff code classification service is an artificial intelligence-based classification system. One of its key features is to understand your item. If it can understand your item, it can help you classify. And that's one of the strengths of this tool. If you don't put in enough information, it'll Q&A the user to answer questions till it gets to a code. So you don't have to worry about how good is my description good enough or not. The service will prompt you to fill in the answer questions to get to a code. Anybody could use it. You can be an expert, you can be a beginning user, or any level of knowledge and classification in between to classify your items. One of the most powerful features of that service is this first item on the top of the page now is what's called a customs ready audit trail. And what that is it is kind of like a receipt for the work a user does to classify an item. And you can store that receipt for future review later on. So whether you have an internal audit, maybe customs comes knocking on your door, you can not only show, along with all of your other information on how you classified your item and your compliance process, you can actually show the details and the decisions someone made to get to a code. So remember that challenge we mentioned earlier where, hey, I don't have enough people, expert people to classify, and my key person is going to retire soon. Oh no, what do I do? That knowledge is walking out the door. It's not anymore. If you have an audit trail tied to that item, you can actually see what that key person, the decisions that key person made to get to that code, so that when someone comes in to replace them or covers their duties, they can also have access to that same decision process that they made. That's one of the most powerful features of that self-serve tool. Okay. Here's an example of that service in action. We lined it up against the UK service. A new classification too. We've got a notebook computer. We didn't get a result for it. When you put it into the self-serve tariff code classification service, you have a universal 6. And if you scroll down, we're not showing you that. We're just showing you the universal 6. You can actually see the decisions that were made and the understanding of the item by the service. You would get whatever country you were attempting to classify, and you would see that schedule past the 6, and you'd be able to make a decision based on that. So you can see the difference in the 2 services. One you're not getting results, and one you're getting a rich result with answers as to the main question: how did you get to that code? It's right there for you. Managed services. So here's that second option. Hey, Colin, I don't want to do it. I want to give it to Avalara to do. How does that work? You send you detailed product information, more than you would to the self-serve service. You can send more details in, including even links to a website or pictures. You'd send all that information into the service. We have automation and AI tools that help that teams, but the most important part is right at the end. Experts as a service. These are the people who make sure that the code that's returned to you is an accurate code, on top of using all that technology. Okay, and that's the right balance of technology and people to get the job done. Now, this is an interesting section. Trends. What's going on in the world that affects your ability to classify and your reason to classify accurately and so on? Very interesting trends we're seeing out there. Let's talk about a few of them. First one, governments realize a lot of people are filing declarations, and they realize that they've got to make it easier. And they also want to make the option to allow importers of record to self-file. And in that realization, they're also letting service providers provide those services. They're not just saying, go to my government site and classify. So if you were to Google, if in the UK, one example is Deloitte has a customs clear product. They use the self-serve classifier built in so that when the user gets to the point of identifying and classifying their item on a line-by-line basis, they can put an accurate result there. That's just one example. But the governments recognize that they have to make filing entries to them easier. So this is just one step in that direction. The second one is the WCO realizes that, we talked about some of those complexities in the HS. They recognize it too. And so they're trying to do more updates. They're trying to make it easier. That word modernize, they're trying to modernize it for modern times to make it as easy as possible for people to use, despite the complexities involved in classifying all these items. And that's great because they're actively working at it. I was at a recent WCO conference, and that discussion is a continuing, ongoing discussion, how to make it easier to use DHS. The third one, there's an increased use of artificial intelligence and machine learning by governments to check previous declarations for compliance. Let me give you an example. You might make every effort to classify your item accurately at the time of entry and reporting to customs for clearance and release. Customs has the decision to say, look, I can check that now, or I can check it down the road. And so what they're doing is they're saying they're taking these artificial intelligence tools and they're saying, this is an example. They're saying we have found an error rate very high in a particular domain of product. We are going to target that domain of product, find all the importers who've imported it, and we're going to look back 3 to 5 years. And they use these AI machine learning tools to do that. Now, if you watch the news and you see advancements in this, just think about how the government can use that tool for this usage. And then you think, are my codes accurate in that time frame? So this is going to impact how you look at your classifications post-entry. The fourth one, the government, do you remember that our first slide we talked about, where does that code go? That code goes to customs, and it goes to all the other regulatory agencies that work with customs to make sure that you are meeting requirements to import your item. So they recognize that we need to make that reporting easier. So they build what's called an electronic single window, and it's a single place for you to put all your information in to get it cleared by customs and checked by any other agency, especially if you have a food product or a product governed by another government agency, food and drug, and there are other agencies, electronic items and so on. They're making it easier for you to comply with these other government agencies with these single windows, and it's growing. So that's going to make your life a little easier. And last but not least, increased use of blockchain. Blockchain, I'm not an expert in blockchain, but what I do understand with blockchain is there's an ability / opportunity to store an HS code against your item for future review and use. You want to make sure that you store the correct item within your blockchain data set, because if you don't, then that has this tie to your item all the time. So something you want to keep in mind when there's this advancement of technology and maybe services that you use where that is the case. Here's a few other things for business to consider. on the left, but the whole, if there's a theme to this slide, it's this. You can outsource your process for classification or for trade compliance, but you cannot outsource responsibility. Customs and the government will always look at you for compliance. And if your process has issues, or it doesn't matter what service provider is using or technology using, you are responsible for answers to the government for any shortcomings. Okay. So we have a UK quote on the left. Look at this quote in the middle. This is very interesting. U.S. Customs provides guidance to government auditors when they're doing trade assessments and audits, and look at what they're looking for. Look at the red flags. Look at that first one. How's your documentation process? Do you store and record your classifications accurate? Do you have constant communication with your brokers on classifying of items? Do you have enough qualified people to do it? And is there a high turnover of key positions that has an effect on classifications? You know how these audits go. Tax and government's the same. If they find one red flag, they'll keep digging. And the more red flags they get, your audit's not over. So I can tell you these are things that most companies struggle with. And it's something they're constantly working on improving so that these don't pop up on an auditor's view as they go about these audits. And it's something for you to consider as well. To keep in mind the importance of classification accurately and the process you built around it. A few technology differentiators that we've talked about today. On the left, we talked about the AI expert-based system. We talked about the self-serve tariff code classifier by Avalara. That column covers that. The keyword search engines that we mostly see at the government level are in the middle, and even our machine learning services that are available, automation that people might build into their systems, these are also available. If you look at optimal offerings and what you want to choose, this is what people gravitate to. They gravitate to, in the middle of the first column, fourth box down, delivers one correct answer. People don't want to crawl through potential answers that may be wrong, which the machine learning provides. People want an audit trail, the next box. They want the second from the bottom. They want a receipt and the ability to see, how did I get to this code? The other two services cannot provide that information. Just on those two key data elements alone, you have the ability to decide what's the best solution for you. So let's recap what we talked about today. First one is obvious. HS classification is complex. Okay. Secondly, you need enough product detail and information to classify accurately. If you don't, you are more at risk to classify incorrectly and the consequences of that. Third, we also saw that not all classification tools are created the same. Okay, some are more helpful than others. And finally, the biggest takeaway, you can outsource your process, but you can't outsource your responsibility. So you want to make sure that everything you've established, even the tools that you use, help support an accurate classification process. Thank you for your time. Any questions you'd like to ask, we can provide answers.
Thanks, Colin. Thank you so much. I think you did a great job. This is something that I think as tax people, and maybe as someone who works, lives and breathes sales and use tax, international taxes, this is something that might fall back to the back burner or not be addressed or forgotten. So I'm glad that we're giving it space that it needs. I have a few questions for you, and we're going to try and keep it as, might go a couple minutes over, but you all know my saying, I can talk forever about taxes. Time flies. So I have a quick question for you, Colin. When and where does this HS code classification happen? Where does it show up, and at what part of the process? Like, when does this happen? Because they may need to work with certain teams to align on this.
So depending on your operations, we always recommend that classification be done as soon as possible. We've talked to engineering and manufacturing companies. They get their engineers to start the ball rolling, and then they hand off to their trade compliance team. In the e-commerce cycle, it might be a little different. Once you've procured an item, you have the description, you make an attempt to classify it before you actually sell it online. The recommendation is classify as soon as possible. So if you're missing information or you have questions, you can address it before it impacts your transaction, whether it's crossing a border or you're finalizing a purchase order with your supplier. That's what we recommend. And so it's a global process. You may need to classify in more than one country, but we recommend classifying as soon as you can.
I think that's a great follow-up to my next question, because when I hear your presentation, I'm like, wouldn't that fall on the product people or the people who are a little bit closer to the product? I think a lot of people in this audience and our customers, we're tax people, we're the tax department. Why is this responsibility falling on the tax people? Well, it's because it's showing up on your paper trail and you can get audited for it. But I think it really is a partnership, and HS code classification is a partnership with your product teams, maybe your engineering teams. Would you agree?
Yes. Classification for global trade has also been called indirect tax. There's countries have VAT taxes, and you're calculating that in your international transaction. So yes, you need the product people who understand the product so that they can guide an accurate classification. You need the tax people so they can handle their responsibility on that international transaction. You need a multiple you need the right amount or the right people accessing or part of the process in order to get accurate classification and subsequently accurate duty rates, taxes, and so that you have correct information flowing through the whole process.
Okay, perfect. And I'm going to ask one last question. Maybe we can answer it in like a run-on sentence because we're out of time. But this service, this HS classification tool, the self-serve classification tool, how do we know it's accurate, right? If so many other companies and so many other softwares are maybe not doing a great job of making sure theirs are accurate, how do we know ours is if we're all picking from the same data sources?
That's a great question. So the answer is, and you've seen this in the slides, the majority of errors in classification come from people not having enough information input into the service. And so when we help clients classify, we find that when they put their attention to making sure that they can answer that question in classifying that PC or that notebook or that apparel item, the gender, what's the construction, these are factors that have a direct impact on an ad classification. And as far as the tool itself is concerned, just as how national tariff schedules are updated regularly, we keep the service updated, and we do regression testing on a daily basis on a prorated or a specific set of data to make sure that when users do interact with it, they are getting an accurate result.
Okay, perfect. Colin, thank you. Unfortunately, that's the end of our time today. I know we could keep talking about it, but thank you so much for being here. I'm going to talk about some of the other upcoming webinars that we have coming up. So here's our events calendar. The rest of the year, we're going to be virtual. So here's a few webinars that we have coming up. We are back in person, though. So there's some exciting things. We're coming to a city near you. Keep an ear and eye out for that. Check these out. There are opportunities for CPE credit. If you need some more CPE credit by the end of the year, I believe all three of these offer CPE credits. You get 3 CPE credits in like 1 week. So check these out. Thank you so much for joining us today. In the post-event email, you're going to receive a link back to this console so you can view the on-demand recording, the slide deck, and the additional resources. In that email, too, you'll also get a bunch of goodies, just like the slide deck and the additional resources. So if you want to listen back, check out some of the slides. You're going to get all of that in about 24 hours in your email. That's it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Colin. Have a great day, everybody.